Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Jones. Welcome to Interchange, and thank you so very much for once again joining us. Big fight between Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clark and Milwaukee County Executive Chris Abele over the Sheriff's Department budget. We will talk about that, of course. We'll talk about Scott Walker calling the legislature into special session to deal with the job creation issues. And we'll talk about why in the world it would cost $80,000 or more to get a permit to run a taxi cab here in Milwaukee. And we'll talk about the Brewers' chances in this first set of playoff games. All right, let me introduce everybody. Newspaper columnist Joel McNally. Kevin Fischer, longtime broadcaster, political analyst, and oftentimes a fill-in host over on WISN Talk Radio. And Denise Callaway, the coordinator of business and community partnerships for the Milwaukee Public School System. Rick Horowitz will be along with commentary at the end of the show. All right, the first thing we'll talk about is the budget presented by new Milwaukee County Executive Chris Abele this week. As promised, there is no increase in the property tax levy, just like Scott Walker used to do. But how does Abele do it? He does it by telling employees and retirees they'll be paying more for their health benefits, and by drastically cutting the budget for the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Department. David Clark, the sheriff, calls the proposal insane and says it would gut his department. I don't know, Denise, Clark didn't hold back on this one at all.
No, I wish he would have said what he really thought. You know, that's always the problem with Sheriff Clark.
Yeah, he never does he?
He always holds back. I don't think it's going to gut the department. It's not going to do that. And the reality of it is that's a department that has seen its budget grow and grow and grow and grow 62% over the past decade plus. So it's not as if this is a budget that has been starved over the past couple of years. And the reality of it is, when we take a look at the kind of budget issues that the county is facing, everybody has to share some of the pain. You can't have one department that is simply held harmless. So I think the cuts that were made, while obviously were not to the sheriff's liking, they're cuts that do not hurt his ability to perform his core constitutional duties in terms of protecting citizens in Milwaukee County. There's nothing that's been taken away that impinges upon his ability to do those core duties that he's responsible for. There are things that he likes and that he's very fond of that are going under this budget away. But the reality of it is, he's still going to have plenty of money. He's still going to be able to patrol the parks. He's still going to be able to respond to issues that happen on county buses. And some of those, quite frankly, being able to, in part, by making those cuts to the Sheriff's Department, to be able to hold on to the bus routes that we have at this critical time when more and more people depend upon public transportation to get to work and to keep their jobs, I think is a much more important issue for more citizens in this county than whether or not we have 5 more canine units.
Joel, the county supervisors, they'll set the budget. Abele can veto if he wants. But Clark made it very clear in a number of interviews I heard with him that nobody is going to tell him how to run his department.
That's the way he acts and talks. He's an arrogant jerk, frankly. He says, I don't answer to the county executive or the county board or anybody else. Well, maybe they can't tell him what to do, but they set his budget. And I think he was a fool, first of all, to take on Chris Abele. I'll put my money on Chris Abele. He still, as Chris Abele pointed out in his address, the sheriff's budget accounts for 49% of the county budget. Now, that's not exactly starving the sheriff's department. And boy, the fact that he said what he really wanted to hang on to was a boot camp program that cost $800,000, that its first class graduated 30 graduates, an $800,000 program that all the experts in corrections and law enforcement have scrapped boot camp programs because they're worthless. They affect very few people. They're mean and they're tough, and that's why the sheriff likes it. And he says, well, if you're going to try to scrap my boot camp program, I'll just cut all those other programs. As a matter of fact, he already has. He's cut drug treatment, he's cut job placement, he's cut GEDs, he's cut anything that would actually do some good for these people, and instead wants to use this punity program. You know, he can be the arrogant guy that he is and go on all the right-wing talk shows and they'll fawn all over him, but I'm telling you, that is not a correct position to take politically in this county. At the same time, everybody else's programs are being gutted. You compared, you know, Chris Abele holding the line on the budget with Scott Walker. There's one thing very different about what Abele did. He promised and he acted on it, came through saying, I'm going to protect the programs for the most vulnerable. I'm going to protect, not only am I going to protect, I'm going to expand mental health treatment in the community. I'm going to save, you know, the transit routes for the poorest people in this community. But certain people who have been untouchable before are no longer untouchable, and that happens to be Sheriff Clark.
But how wise is it politically to screw with law enforcement?
I have been of the opinion for a long, long time, having covered local government in this area since 1978, that you commit political suicide when you compromise public safety. Whether you're a mayor, an alderman, a county executive, a county supervisor, you never really want to champion yourself as a budget cutter when it comes to police, fire, sheriffs. I can understand to a certain degree what the county executive is doing here. I didn't vote for him. I'm pleasantly surprised by his budget. I like the fact that he kept his promise, as I predicted here on the program, that he would not raise taxes and that he did make some cuts. I think he could have balanced it a little better. He left some areas, some quality of life areas alone. But when you essentially tell Sheriff David Clark, a very strong-willed, passionate individual, that you have a limited role in law enforcement in this community, that is more or less telling the sheriff that you're unnecessary to some degree. We don't need all those deputies. We don't need all those sheriff's deputies in cars and patrolling or bailiffs. And that's the wrong way to approach it. That's the wrong way to talk to this individual. You want to pick a fight with David Clark? I think that's the wrong individual to pick a fight. And I don't know how this is going to turn out, but I don't think the sheriff is going to back down.
You know what makes this different, though? Every municipality has a police department. As Abele pointed out in his message, the Sheriff's Department in 2009 reported 12 crimes to the FBI. Now, is that a major role in law enforcement? That is absurd. The public safety is perfectly well covered under this.
I will say this, having covered the city of Milwaukee budget for many years, I was there in the room when Henry Meyer told Chief Breyer, look,
that's the police department. Right, that's not the sheriff department dealing with 12
I'm actually agreeing with
crimes.
you if you let me finish, Joel. But Henry Meyer sat across the table and look, Chief, your department is taken care of fiscally. You get a lot of money, and yes, it's true. The mayor sets the city budget, the county executive sets the county budget, and those are the trump cards those leaders have.
All right, next topic. Governor Scott Walker is calling the legislature into special session to do what it can to create an environment for job growth here in Wisconsin. Now, we all know what happened the last time he called them into special session. Lots of trouble broke out. Will there be more surprises and more demonstrations this time around? What do you think, Joel?
Yeah, and just like the first time when he says this is a job creation, and it turned out to be nothing about job creation. It turned out to be about, you know, destroying unions and gutting education and that sort of thing. This time he says it's job creation, and the agenda, when you look at it, is well, there's a major company that wants to, you know, do some mining in northern Wisconsin that will help destroy the environment, and the Indians are against it.
Actually, that's not part of the session, that bill. Joel, that's not part of the special session.
That absolutely is. That's part of the whole intention,
but it's not as
and it will be, believe me. And the other thing is to remove regulations. You remove some of the controls, give more giveaways to the corporations, remove environmental regulations. In the name of job creation, I would like some some jobs created. You know, everyone agrees in this state, and as a matter of fact, Scott Walker ran on it. You know, jobs, 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 and so far, instead of creating jobs, he's been destroying them and cutting wages and getting rid of unions, and now he wants to get rid of regulations, get rid of environmental protections, and open up the North to the mining companies, and that is not job creation. That's a whole other agenda, and he's just making up a phony excuse for it.
Denise, could Scott Walker do anything in this session that would make the other side happy?
Compromise.
Job,
I think would be create jobs, but I mean compromise. You know, I think what makes people nervous is the feeling from the last session in that, you know, do we really know what's going to be out there? Do we really know what's going to come forward from the governor? Do we really know what's going to come forward from Republicans? And is it going to be clearly focused on working together with Democrats to come up with a plan, not just, you know, picking, you know, one company that you want to help do this and another company that you want to help do this through the legislative process, but actually having a plan to create jobs that says, here are the things that we need to be able to do, and here's either the legislative support that we need to provide, or here's what we need to be able to do in terms of what the governor may think are remedies to regulations exist that he may feel are not helpful to business owners right now. But I think what makes people nervous is that there's no plan. It's just we're going to have a session and we're going to talk about jobs, and there's this possible piece that may come on mining, and we've got some regulation issues that we want to take a look at. Fine and good, but actually come up with a plan so people will know what's going to be put in front of them. I mean, if you don't, I think you really set yourself up for some version of what you saw last time. This time, maybe it won't be public employees. Maybe it'll be those environmental groups then that are camped out at the Capitol. But I think that overall, because of what happened last time and the way that it was done, there is a question, an issue of trust amongst citizens about what's really going to happen. How is it really going to help with jobs? Or is it just a matter of a legislative session that cuts some deals for big business and we move on?
Is he going to try to improve his image with the session?
I think this is a reaction to the slump that occurred after the job creation that took place between December and August, where the net growth in jobs was 30,100. The national economy is also suffering, and Wisconsin, as a result of that, is suffering the last couple of
so as the president's
job
fault
tallies.
He didn't create any jobs?
Well, you know, this Denise, you really need to go and look at the agenda. You say there's no plan. There's no plan. There's 30 separate pieces of legislation.
Exactly.
None of them are company specific or special interest specific. Many are introduced by Democrats, are authored by Democrats.
You want to bet how many of those Democratic bills are going to pass?
And are supported by Democrats. And I think what we're going to see now is the legislature will go through the process now. These bills were just put on the table. They'll have to go through the process. They'll have to go through co-sponsorship, find supporters for these various bills. They'll have to have public hearings, committee hearings. They'll have to go to both floors of the legislature. And what happened after the last go-round was there was a job spurt, a job growth spurt. And business leaders, the governor was just in Green Bay this week, business leaders are telling him that there needs to be more. We need to be given some confidence by the state government that the state will make things more comfortable for business to do business here.
How much more comfortable could it get for business than Scott Walker giving them anything they want?
Well, there is the issue of regulation. There is the issue of over-regulation and too many rules and too many obstacles. And a lot of those bills that are on this special session agenda,
a lot of the bills, not the plan, but a lot of the bills,
will deal with some of these barriers that business have to creating jobs and expanding.
Again, there is no plan. There is,
Read the
as
agenda.
Kevin said himself, I have read the agenda, and as Kevin said himself, there are lots of different bills that are coming from lots
Right.
of different places.
Well, what do you
There
want?
is nothing.
It's a
what the
legislative
governor,
session.
what the governor
Legislative
said, what the
sessions deal
governor
with
said he
bills.
was going to do, which was to bring forward a plan around jobs. And that has not happened in this legislative
The
session.
legislature
It's not there.
creates legislation.
It does,
He is
but-
asking them to come forward with certain bills that will make it easier for business to do business here
Right,
and
but
create
I'm
jobs.
going to ask you the
He
same.
is compromising,
I-
and many of those bills that are on the agenda were authored by Democrats or are supported
I
by
am
Democrats.
asking you the same question that Republicans have often asked of President Obama when he has said, let the legislative process lead, and you all said that's not good enough. You said you want to see a plan. I think people in this state, with the unemployment rate that we have, particularly amongst people of color, deserve
going
to
up.
see a plan, not a hodgepodge, a plan.
Well,
and we don't have it.
go read the
we don't
agenda
Have it. I've read
again.
the agenda,
I
and there's
believe
no
you
plan.
when you say you read it,
There
but you
is
didn't read it
no
carefully.
plan.
All right, and next
30
topic.
separate bills.
No plan.
That
A
sounds
group-
like a plan to me.
Not
A
plan.
group of Milwaukee cab drivers is going to court to try and force the city of Milwaukee to change its rules having to do with how many taxi cabs are on the streets of Milwaukee. The number has been capped at 321 for almost 2 decades. And if you want one of those permits, you have to buy it from the guy who has it. And they reportedly have been going from anywhere between $80,000 and $150,000 a piece just to get the permit to run a cab. And one guy owns half of all the permits. This really does sound like a pretty kooky setup. And it's been this way for a while.
Oh, it sure has. And I never thought we had cab service in Milwaukee. Milwaukee is one of the few major cities where you can't, stand on a street corner and get a cab. You have to know where they are. And if you're a visitor to Milwaukee,
Good luck.
Good luck, because what you have to do is go to a hotel or somewhere else
kiosk.
that you know that a cab happens to be parked, because you're never going to be able to get a cab on the street. It's not going to happen. And I think it's a ridiculously small number of permits to start with that was set 2 decades ago.
Arbitrarily.
I have to think that there's, the people who have, the business and are getting wealthy off the business, are contributing to the people who control their business, and their business isn't ever going to change, and they're not going to let anybody else in on it. Because they've got it, and that's why there's virtually no real major city cab service in Milwaukee, like there is in every other city in the country.
I would say every single time I've taken a cab in the last 2-3 years, the cab driver complained about this, saying it's impossible to really make a good living driving a cab because this one guy controlled all the licenses.
Well, sure. And because you have a cap, that eliminates competition, and you have one guy gobbling up half the permits, and he's cool with the idea because
Right.
there's less
making a lot of money.
competition, less business going up against his business, and it is arbitrary. Why 321? Why not 322 or 323? It's anti-business, it's anti-competition, it's anti-entrepreneur. And
anti-visitor to Milwaukee.
Well, yes, and it's anti-Milwaukeean that wants to drive. Go. There are Milwaukeeans who maybe don't want to use the bus service and want to use cabs, and cabs are available, but you're going to have to wait a heck of a long time before it comes to your door. So I don't know, because you have the cap. That means that the value of that permit is going to be inflated to the point, as you said, $150,000 to open up your own cab company with maybe just one cab.
Well, that explains why the cabs look so bad.
Well, who can afford that?
Why not have 1,000?
Yeah, I agree.
Why have a cap at all?
Yeah, I don't know why we need to have a cap, at least that is so low. It is. It's impossible if you want to try to hail a cab downtown. You can't. You've got to go to a hotel. You hope you're close enough to walk to a hotel.
If
to
you
go
know
ahead.
where the hotel
right,
is.
if you know where the hotel is, if you're a visitor, and to be able to then go ahead and access the cab at one of the hotel cab stands. But it doesn't make any sense for us to be in a major city and not to be able to hail a cab when you're walking down the street. Yeah, and then there is this inordinate wait that people can experience for a cab. And the other thing that we do know, and I think this is also in part because there's a cap, there are some cab drivers, some cab companies that won't even go into certain parts of the city
true.
to pick up riders. And there's no pressure for them to do that because there is no competition. So I think if we want to have, as part of a transportation system, people to have access to cabs, then we need to be able to take a look at ways in which we can raise the cap. I don't know that we need to do away with the cap totally.
Oh, just get
but
rid
I
of
mean,
it.
what would happen if we increased that number by another 50%? I think it would open up competition. It would give people the opportunity to be able to access these cabs no matter where they are in the city. And you could be walking down the street and actually hail a cab.
What a concept.
I know. Well, and unless you happen to be an African-American man, because in no city in the city of Milwaukee or in the city of this country is it possible, it seems to be certainly impossible, for African-American men to hail cabs no matter where you are.
All right, shifting gears. This weekend, the Brewers begin the playoffs. Everybody's excited. Is it fair to say that most fans are worried less about our ability to take care of Arizona and more about the next opponent, which will be St. Louis or Philadelphia?
Well, I think you're onto something, and I am, when it comes to sports on this panel, the most pessimistic. I would say most realistic.
And Arizona's a darn good team.
I liked it the way you said it
very
before.
good,
Sports
and they're very hot. Well, people are acting, and I understand we haven't won a division in almost 30 years. I understand that. We're euphoric. We are on cloud nine. We are also acting like we've won everything, when in reality, yes, division title, but we haven't won anything yet. We have put ourselves in a position to win something, but we haven't won anything. And Arizona's coming in game one with quite possibly the best pitcher in the National League, Ian Kennedy. I don't think it's too far-fetched to say that the Brewers have to win game one to win this series, because if they don't, to go to Arizona 1-1 or 0-2 and then face Ian Kennedy again, and we know that the Brewers are just as good as they are not the same team on the road. I worry about that. But it is a short series. Anything can happen, and I think this is a very evenly matched series, but I think you've got to win game one at home.
Are a lot of folks assuming we're just going to win this series?
I don't know. I don't think they are. In fact, I've heard more pessimism than I expected, because
Really?
when you look at this team is an extraordinary team on every level. I mean, we're talking about the starting pitching, which everyone knows is great, but also the bullpen and the back of the bullpen, which is great. It's those two things are probably as good as any team in baseball. The starting pitching doesn't get the same, isn't heralded like the Phillies pitching is, because they got a few Cy Young.
It's not as good as the Phillies,
but it's damn close.
It's very close.
and it's very competitive, and the bullpen is probably better.
Yes.
And then we have some great offense, and so on the three major categories we can play with anybody, including the Phillies. I think you're right. A lot of people seem to think that the first round is just a given. It's not, because it's a short series, first of all, and just 5 games. So some screwy things can happen in just a few games.
And it isn't Pittsburgh or the Cubs anymore.
Yeah,
it's a whole it's a whole new season, and these are good teams you're going to face.
There's a lot of reason for optimism.
I'm just worried that every game I see is getting us closer to the last game that we're going to see with Prince Fielder in a Brewer uniform. I think that's it.
I think you're right.
Too bad, but it's great to have him here all this time.
All right, the biggest news in presidential politics this week, a presidential-sounding speech at a presidential library by a guy who insists he's not running for president. Well, Rick Horowitz has been watching all the twists and turns in the Republican nomination fight, and he thinks he's found a way to explain it. Rick.
Here's what it's like. It's like you're at a restaurant. You're at a restaurant and your name is George Orlando Pick'em-Right. Your friends just call you GOP, and you have millions of friends. And it's not just any restaurant, it's 2012, the hottest new restaurant in town. And you've got a gift card. You can order anything you want. It's the chance of a lifetime. So you read the menu top to bottom twice. The Romney is particularly tasty tonight, your waiter says. I don't think so, you say, and you keep reading. I don't see the Palin, you say. Didn't you used to serve the Palin? Well, not for some time, I'm afraid, sir. Oh, that's too bad. I always wanted to try the Palin, you say. Perhaps the Trump, the waiter says. You don't want the Trump. The Trump would be hard to digest. Same with the Bachman. The Santorum, the Cane, they just don't do it for you. The Paul, too strange. The Gingrich, too hot. So you point at the blackboard. Tell me about your daily specials, you say. Ah, the Perry, he says. The Perry in a rich Texas barbecue sauce. Very popular tonight. And he sweeps his arm across the room. And it's true, there are plates of the Perry practically flying out of the kitchen on these beautiful silver trays. But then you notice something peculiar. There are almost as many plates of the Perry being sent back to the kitchen. Can a daily special go so bad so quickly? Who knows? But there's something about the Perry that people just don't like. Maybe it's the barbecue sauce. So you open the menu again. You know what might really hit the spot, you say? Some Christie. I've heard wonderful things about the Christie. Oh, the Christie's not in season, sir, at least not yet. Are you sure? We've checked with our supplier, sir, several times. The Christie's simply not available. I could wait, you say. Sir, he says there's no guarantee the Christie will ever be available. And excuse me, sir, but you're here for dinner tonight. This isn't how you pictured it at all. The restaurant of your dreams for the best meal of your life, and nothing excites you. There's still the Romney, the waiter says. There's always the Romney. You look the waiter square in the eye. I don't want the Romney.
Well, thank you, Rick, and thank you so very much for watching. The always reliable New York Post says that Christie could make his decision Monday.
I like that.
Enjoy the rest of your weekend.